Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. You can find their daily in-depth coverage and subscribe at CompassKnox.com.
Welcome to Compass Points, a podcast about Knoxville and Knox County government, politics, business, education, and just about anything else that grabs our attention. I am Scott Barker, the editor of Compass. We're a subscription-based website and newsletter where we report on all that stuff and more. And you can find us at CompassKnox.com. Joined as always on the podcast by Jesse Mayshark, who is the other founder of Compass. And he also runs has his own podcast called Headlights. And so we are recording this at the Barbarian Production Studios in Rocky Hill, where Lord Seth Barber is the producer. Jesse, how are things going this week?
Going pretty well. Happy Juneteenth. We're recording on Friday, June 19th, and I hope people are both enjoying the holiday and also maybe paying some heed to what it celebrates.
Well, and can say Happy Father's Day to
all of us.
To all of us, actually, because this is going to be released on Father's Day. So, big weekend.
Yep.
I think I saw a thing that the Father's Day is the 20th most popular U.S. holiday.
It's pretty far down the list.
Yeah. Can you think of 19 other ones? There's a comedian doing a bit on it, but it's a true fact. I looked it up. So
yeah.
Well, by a survey, but you know what I mean.
All right. Well, Seth, it's obligatory 3-day-old weather report. What's going on?
We got a little sprinkle. We got a little rain last night. Not mad at that on Thursday night. We got a little, some scattered showers came through. I think we're supposed to get a little bit more over the weekend, but it's we are starting to approach a proper Knoxville summer where standing outside for more than about 7 minutes requires a wardrobe change. Come in and change your shirt because you sweat that much in the 15 minutes of just standing in the gajillion % humidity at 85, 95, somewhere in the 80s, high 80s, low 90s, and it's just sweat.
Yeah, it's a wet heat.
Yeah, I like that. I should use that one more often. And since to touch on the busy weekend on Father's Day as well, I'm excited that us and the Happy Holler are participating in the Make Music Knoxville?
Day? Right. If you happen to be listening to this on Sunday the 21st, it is Make Music Day, and you can find lots of free music going on all over town, including in Happy Holler, as Seth says.
It's a multifaceted, shameless self-promotion because you have some personal invest in that.
That's right. My wife works for the Arts and Culture Alliance, and they
Scott's
are the ones who organize that.
So we make sure
here.
everybody's included.
That's right.
Well, all right. Well, this week we have a bunch going on. It's kind of development day with the podcast. We have an interview with Hanson Sale, who writes about development on his own Substack and is quite knowledgeable about real estate stuff. And so we'll talk to him. We'll also look at a county commission's rejection of a development in downtown Carter. You want to call it downtown Carter, but it is basically downtown Carter in East Knox County. We'll also take a look at the 2025 development report that the Knox County Planning Office issued in recent weeks, and take a look at some of the key facts out of it. But we will start out talking about the Knox County budget, which County Commission approved on Monday, and they did something that I don't think I've ever seen before.
Yeah,
and that is they raided the school budget and diverted $4 million out of the school budget to pay for larger raises for employees of general county government. which I've never seen before. I don't have you seen that before, Jesse?
No, I mean, the school board and county commission have a history of conflicts in the past, although really for the last couple of decades, there's been a sort of détente. In general, the school board has worked in recent years, certainly during the Glenn Jacobs tenure and during most of the tenure of former county mayor Tim Burchett, there's been basically the school system finance people work closely with the Maine Knox County finance people to understand what the revenue projections are, and the school board has been pretty agreeable about requesting budgets and funding levels that will be accommodated within the projected revenue growth, which the school board's not obligated to do. I mean, the school board could, year after year, if they wanted to, put in budget requests to the county that would require a tax increase in order to be filled. Now, the county wouldn't be obligated to do that, but the school board could pass. I mean, the school board can pass any proposed budget they want to. They've been very cooperative about proposing budgets that are within the revenue growth that the county is expecting. And so as a result of that, those budgets have been typically just kind of folded into the county budget by the county mayor and put forward to county commission and approved. And this year that budget that is what happened. I mean, the school board adopted a budget. They sent it to Jacobs. Jacobs incorporated their budget into his budget that he presented to county commission. But then at the last minute, county commission said, no, we want to use some of that money for other things.
Yeah. It was kind of an interesting thing. I had a feeling that this would be attempted, in some fashion, because of some of the questions, that a couple of the commissioners had asked during the budget hearing, previous budget hearing. But one of the first attempt here was Angela Russell, who represents Farragut and Southwest Knox County. She proposed taking a big chunk out of the budget. She wanted to cut it by. Trying to look it back up now, but I missed. $13 million.
Yeah.
The school's budget is about $17 million higher than the current year's budget, the one that they proposed to and put in Jacob's proposal. And she wanted to cut $13 million out of it, and she wanted to cut out all funding for the new K-8 school that is planned for the rural high school site in northwest Knoxville near Western Heights. So she wanted to do that. That was kind of interesting. She got a lot of pushback from her. And her
goal, right, was to divert all of that to roads.
She wanted to divert. In fact, she got Jim Snowden, who is the engineering public works director for the county, up there, and he basically said, "Yeah, we could pave with that money. We could essentially quadruple the mileage that of roads that they could build." So it was that was her goal there. But she got a lot of pushback, not because of that she wanted to put it toward roads, but that because she didn't, and she admitted that she didn't talk to anyone in the school system about why the budget was $17 million higher than it was, right, or
what it would mean to make that cut,
or why they needed a new school.
Yeah.
In fact, acted kind of like she'd never heard of the new school until it was in the budget. And she admits she's a numbers person. She's not that was her whole thing. But one thing is the school system, and she said, well, going back to 2020, the school's budget's grown by this much. all that. And it's true, the school's budget is much larger than it was. Part of that is the amount of state funding.
Yep.
That's increased. And they have to pay all their teachers at least $50,000 beginning July 1st.
Right. That's the new mandatory minimum pay for any teacher in Tennessee.
And they've had to give teachers raises all along to get them to that point. And part of that is in this year's budget. So there's really not $13 million to take out. So that was
well, and keeping in mind that the school budget as presented only included a 2.6% salary increase to the school system's salary schedule, which, and teachers get step increases as well depending on where they are in their career. But they were and that's going to be, as we know, less than inflation this year.
Right.
So even with the budget as presented, the school system was already proposing a very modest, that's the smallest increase in some years to teacher and school staff salaries.
Yeah, and one thing that the school officials will bring up, they don't make a big deal out of it, but they've cut 130 positions, mostly in a central office, over the past couple of years. So it's there's they're not just like throwing money away over there. Don't appear to be, but that proposal ended up being rejected. It was a 5-3 vote on that. We had one commissioner who wasn't there.
7-3, wasn't it?
7-3, yes. Sorry, 7-3, because we had one commissioner who was not there. Then we had the proposal, and this came out kind of out of the blue because nobody had really been talking about this. Gina Oster, the chair, said, we want to take these raises. And you mentioned inflation in raises. General county government employees were getting 3% raise under Jacob's budget. She wanted to double that to 6%, and do that, take $4 million out of the school's budget. And that was greeted with much more enthusiasm than the Russell's proposal was. They discussed it quite a bit, but one of the things is what they're doing is, of course, they can't tell the schools how to spend their money. They can only just give them money, but they can't, or can appropriate money for them, but they can't tell them what to spend it on. So what they're doing is, the way they couched it is, we're going to take 2 cents off the tax rate that normally goes to the property tax rate that normally goes to the schools, and give it to the general government, put it in the general fund, and that equates to about $4 million. And so the schools have $4 million less in revenue. And one of the things that they brought up is, well, they've got $71 million in reserves. Well, and said, well, you could use that, but one thing the school officials said was, those are reserves. We don't use those for ongoing expenses, and salaries are ongoing expenses.
Right. It's considered bad accounting practices to pay for ongoing expenses with one-time reserve funding.
So what they are going to end up doing is they're going to have to go back and approve a revised school budget,
which could mean cutting more positions.
That's exactly what it means. It means that the first thing that they're going to end up doing is looking at school staffing levels, which means jobs, and take a look at that. And $4 million is I don't know how many positions that funds. Quite a few. So, and do you take that? Support staff certainly should be concerned. Some teachers might be concerned if they're, they do have a pretty decent student teacher ratio going right now, but it's going to be tough sledding for the schools. And again, this kind of goes back to the whole county financing thing, because here, just recently, well, first of all, talk about the paving. Snowden says that right now they're only paving about half the number, the mileage of roadways that need to be paved to keep up.
Right,
with
just
maintenance.
doing maintenance.
Yeah, it's just pure maintenance. They're only doing about half of what they can do. Then they also recently had to, or in this budget, had to take money from engineering and public works to pay for an increase in contract to haul waste and recycling from the convenience centers to their final destinations. And that contract increase, they had to take money from engineering and public works to do that. Then now they're taking money from the schools to pay for this. Basically, what that tells me, and or the way I interpret it, is they're not bringing in enough money to pay for the things that people expect.
We've been talking about this here for literal years.
Yeah.
And writing about it in Compass, the financial condition of the county government specifically, that they have had less and less and less money to spend on general county government operations because revenues, the property taxes that they primarily rely on for a lot of county services, have just not kept pace with, like, everything is getting more expensive. Mm-hmm. Fuel, obviously, we've had a big run up during the Iran war, but fuel costs are up, labor costs are up, materials costs are up. We've had big, run ups in all of these things, certainly in the last 5 years, last 10 years. And property taxes, for reasons that we've talked about here many times, do not keep pace with inflation. They just don't. They're designed, literally designed to not keep pace with inflation. Mm-hmm. And the reason, and on top of that, of course, we've also talked about the county's growing debt payments, which they have, these sort of balloon payments from 30 years ago coming due now. And the result is that, I don't know how much more of a stark illustration that anybody needs of the county's financial situation than that their only option to give, a good raise to general county employees is to literally raid the school budget, which, as you say, is not something they've done in the past. It's a precedent. It's probably not a precedent the school board's super happy about. And we are, of course, in the middle of an election season. The Republican candidate for county mayor, Betsy Henderson, her entire platform is based on, just absolutely swearing up and down never to raise taxes. If she wins, and if you can kind of project out, let's say she serves for 8 years, become the fourth county mayor in a row to serve 2 terms and not raise taxes, this is the situation she's coming into. She's coming into a situation where the county is literally having to rob the school budget in order to give raises to its own employees. And that's before she's even in office, saying, and I'm not assuming she's going to win, but Republicans tend to be favored in countywide races.
Republicans have won. The last Democrat to be elected mayor was Tommy Shumpert
in the 1990s.
1990s.
Yeah. And so, that's just the reality. And people can talk all they want about, and Henderson's talked about, well, I'm going to get in there and I'm going to set this priority and that priority. This is what that looks like. When you talk about, I'm going to set these priorities and not spend on those, this is what it looks like. Whatever those positions are that are going to be probably lost in Knox County schools, this is what people can just expect to see year after year after year, because all of those expenses are going to go up and the county's revenues are not going to match them. They just aren't.
Yeah. The whole idea that you can avoid tax increases forever, and is just not realistic. I mean, it's worked for a long time, but in a way, it's worked. I mean,
it's worked, except that the other thing Henderson's running on is that we haven't spent enough on infrastructure. It's like, well, that's because the county hasn't had the money to do it. And there's nothing on the horizon that's going to suddenly magically give you the money to do it. So I don't think that, I mean, a lot of people would say that the county hasn't been doing, and every candidate running for county mayor this year, including Henderson, I mean, that's the other major plank of Henderson's. Plank one for her is no tax increase. Plank two is we need to spend more on infrastructure. Well, the reason we haven't been spending money on infrastructure is because the county doesn't have the money to spend on infrastructure.
And to be fair, plank three is to get growth in check, which is one of the things that got Mayor Jacobs through his 2 terms. That helped him succeed in not having to raise the tax.
He's very pro-growth.
Because he's pro-growth, and that growth has helped offset some of the cost.
Growth does not, for the most part, pay for itself, quote unquote, but it does generate more tax revenue. But also, the kind of growth that generates the most tax revenue is the exact kind of growth, density in general, that the anti-growth people don't want. So they don't want growth. Yeah. They don't want taxes to go up, and they want to spend more money on infrastructure. And at a certain point, this kind of stuff just sounds like this is just
the math doesn't work.
Yeah, it's magical thinking. And it was very well illustrated by what happened at County Commission last week.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And talking about growth and developments, the next thing we're going to be doing, because we're going to talk about the 2025 development report, which was released this month by the Knox County Planning. One of the interesting things that jumped out at me when I looked at the report was the surge in multifamily housing in 2025. The permits for that rose 17% across Knoxville and Knox County, whereas single family permitting for single family homes fell 20%. So it's signals a big shift. It may just be a it may just be a one-time shift, but at least for 2025, a huge shift in the housing stock and that was approved, and this was true even in the county. There are two large projects over 500 units that were built in northwest Knox County, the Hardin Valley area, or between Hardin Valley and I-40 along the Pellissippi Parkway corridor. It's one of those things that there's a resistance in rural parts of the county to multifamily developments, and we'll talk about that too here in a little bit. But this is along the corridor, so it's a little they didn't generate a whole lot of opposition because they're both hard by Pellissippi Parkway. But it was just very, very interesting that when they really put the numbers to it, of the 5,800 or so new units that were permitted, only 1,600 of them were single family. Everything else was multifamily. That's a lot.
Yeah.
And, of course, a lot of that's inside the city. One of the things that strikes, if you haven't been on Neyland Drive in a while, I really recommend that you drive down Neyland Drive, and if there's not a whole lot of traffic, you might have to pull off to the side to be safe. Just look across the river.
Yeah.
The south waterfront from essentially along Blunt Avenue from the Henley Street, the Henley Bridge, west to where the pedestrian bridge is going to be coming in. It's a wall of apartment buildings, condos. It's phenomenal. If you haven't been down there and looked across the river in the last couple of years, you'll be astounded. You won't even recognize it as being South Knoxville.
Yeah. You know what's a really interesting drive to take is if you take Maryville Pike, say get on it at John Sevier Highway and drive north into the city. It still retains a lot of its rural South Knoxville character. For most of that drive, you come up through Mount Olive, you go by Montgomery Village and whatever. There's been a certain amount of development through there, but certainly not overwhelming. And then there's just a point, like right before, sort of right when you come by the Scottish Pike area there, where suddenly, it's sort of like you're driving through like backwoods Appalachia, and then bam, it's just all these big new apartment complexes just right there, all right next to each
roundabouts,
other.
Which makes
and
everybody
a
really
roundabout, and then you still got to go under the little one-lane railroad bridge there. But then when you come up to that intersection of Blunt Avenue and Chapman Highway, looking across toward Sevier Avenue, it's utterly transformed from 15 years ago.
Oh yeah, and you've got the one Riverwalk there. You've got several other apartment buildings. You've got presumably, if it gets approved, the Corbella Temple site will be have a large apartment complex on it there. It's going to almost look like a city.
And there's an RFP out for that whole Scottish Pike area as well, for there to be development there at what will be theoretically the south end of the pedestrian bridge coming across from the UT campus. Yeah. That's all going to get built up too.
Yeah, I mean, if you take the you go down Nealon Drive and you look across and you see all those apartment buildings there. Remember, that's going to be extended further down. There will be the pedestrian bridge coming there, and then more apartments further down.
Yeah. I'm just fascinated by
further down.
By an apartment complex that has its own boat dock. I feel like in my younger days that would have been a really cool amenity to have as a resident. Where now I just feel like I don't want anything to do with that. But I just it'd be kind of fun to be like, hey, I got a boat and it's sitting outside my front door. I can just go hop on the river, because I love to see stuff like that's one of the things I think we've missed in Knoxville. I think we talked about it a couple weeks ago. It's like, I think the downtown portion of the river is very underutilized. And I think having those options for residents to use that waterway recreationally regularly.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of, in Chicago, they've got the iconic sort of the corn cob towers there right in the middle of downtown Chicago, big modernist buildings, and they're right on the Chicago River. And part of the deal with those units is that they come with, there's sort of a circular parking garage in the lower parts of the building, and then the very bottom, the base level, is docks. And it's not like every apartment in the building has a dock, but there are people who live right in the heart of downtown Chicago who can go and hop in their boat and head out onto the lake.
All right, and you can over in the South Waterfront. So I don't know what the ownership is of those docks over there, but. But anyway, that was the one thing that jumped out at me, and I wrote an article last week primarily about that. I also talked to Maria McHale, who's the government affairs director for East Tennessee Realtors. The thing that jumped out to her was the lot size.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things is she's one of the things that the realtors have pushed, that a lot of other people have pushed, is increasing density. And
realtor developers like this because you make more money.
Money. That's true. But also it does reduce sprawl. I mean, you've got higher density. If you've got 200 units that you build in one location, that's 199 single family houses that might not be needed in the middle of a cornfield or pasture that in the rural parts of the county. So, but that really jumped out at her because the average lot size in the subdivisions approved by the county last year was half an acre.
Mm-hmm.
Every lot, half an acre.
Yeah.
And as someone who lives on a lot that is measured in feet and
Yes.
not acreage,
Me too.
it was astounding. Even the city, the average was 1/3 of an acre, but the city doesn't have very many subdivisions to get
Right.
approved.
That must be a fairly small sample size
Yes.
because basically people don't build single family development in the city unless it's infill housing or something.
Yeah, a lot of times it's somebody's got family with a larger piece of property and they want to just divide it up
Right.
and sometimes it's for the same, they're cousins or their sisters or brothers or whatever. But Maria was talking about how that was, completely, the word she used was insane. The 1 half-acre lot, because her whole point is, we're going to use up all the developable land. If you go half acre at a time out through the county, you're
Right.
going to eat up everything.
In a way that's very inefficient from the standpoint of maximizing, residential use of the land, which of course is not the only concern, and lots of people are
Yeah.
concerned about preserving the rural areas of the county. But even under, the new Advanced Knox, the growth plan that the county's adopted in recent years, there are almost no parts of the county that you're not allowed to do some level of residential development in. And what that means is that you're just going to build out all the way to the borders of the county in all directions, but it's all going to be on these large lots, which don't produce as much property tax revenue to help fund the county budget, to help provide the services and the maintenance of the infrastructure that the people moving into those areas are going to want. I mean, this is sort of a circular problem that we're talking about.
Oh yeah, and as we've talked about before, we'll be talking about later on in this as well. Our friend Hanson Sale will be talking about this. The density is a big issue. It is with the comprehensive plan that was passed, called for more density in especially in kind of the crossroads areas of the county and in the along the corridors in the county. And if the idea there is you add density there, you can still preserve the rural character of the other areas away from those crossroads. Like when I say crossroads, I'm talking about Halls, talking about Harbison's Crossroads, which is Gibbs essentially, and Carter, which is the next topic was, and something that happened at County Commission. There's zoning meeting on Monday. In Carter, there's a piece of property just east of kind of the downtown area of Carter, which is kind of one of these crossroads where they want to promote development, more dense development there. This piece of property is between Asheville Highway and Andrew Johnson Highway, and it's kind of wedged in there, and between two roads that connect those highways, and it's between there and Carter schools. So it is ripe for more dense development. Then a family that has owned this piece of property about 15, 16 acres. There in this lot, decided they wanted to sell, and they had been working with Homestead Land Holdings to develop that into either apartments or townhouses. They hadn't decided yet, but it was going to be multifamily. High density would be 192 or 194 units maximum on this 16-acre parcel, and they needed to get it rezoned in order to do that. Right now it's agricultural zone for agricultural use, which is you're not limited to one dwelling unit per acre. So that would be 16.
But it is property that in the comprehensive plan is designated for potential town center development, right?
That's true. And that is the much higher density. It's not a large enough lot to have commercial use, or mixed use on it, but it could be residential and help. One of the things is that the developer Homestead did was they did an analysis, thinking of maybe just using it all commercial on that piece of property, and the area was okay about some things. It's got the highways there, it's got the areas, the income, the people who live in the area was fine, but it just aren't enough people who live in that area to really support a mixed use development yet, a town center development yet. And what their reasoning was to have this approved is, well, this would bring in 194 households to help get that population to where you can have more development there. I mean, one of the points that was made is Carter, right now there's one grocery store near there, one supermarket, and that supermarket is the only one between Granger County and East Knoxville.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it's not it just can't it hasn't been able to support more than
right.
one.
Retail follows residential is
yes,
the way the adage goes.
But the planning commissioners, I'm sorry, the county commissioners,
right? Planning commission had approved this, right?
County, and that was kind of an odd thing too. The planning commission staff, the planning staff, had recommended rejecting because of insufficient infrastructure, the roads next to it, because it's, like I said, it's between these two roads, Pleasant Hill and Kitts Roads, and especially Kitts Road was not sufficient to handle the traffic that would require. But then at planning commission, when the planning commission met, they ended up putting a condition on that the developer enter an agreement with the county to pay for the infrastructure improvements there. And they passed it, but then it gets to county commission, and Adam Thompson, who represents that area on commission, noted that there was lots of opposition to this. People showed up, as they will do, and had signs that saving East Knox County and all, and the reasoning ended up being that it just because it wasn't a full mixed use development there, then the density was too high, and otherwise, I mean, they just, it goes back to that whole idea that of single family homes, the only thing you can do. And even though this is right there, they voted to reject it. We had a couple of abstentions, but that was it. And so it was one of those things where proponents of density would say, well, it's a missed opportunity. And yeah, certainly is, because now, I mean, one of the things that was brought up is that they're the developer, the easiest thing for the property owner to do is to sell it to a developer who will build one dwelling unit per acre on the site, and that would be 16 units, and that be done with it.
Yeah.
And that could happen. And And if that happens, county commission has nothing to do with it because it's already zoned that.
Right. You can just go in and
just
do
go
that.
and do it.
Yeah.
They can build that anytime. So, but this is, that's kind of indicative of these issues in rural Knox County. It was just everything that gets brought up in these disputes distilled into just one issue, and it was and this one was one that the anti density folks won. So.
Yeah, and we see this a lot. Developments come through Planning Commission, which a lot of people have, I think, accurately characterized over time as being fairly pro-development and pro-growth. Planning Commission tends to be overall, because of the people who get appointed to it, and it's overall, they're looking at technical issues rather than political ones. And then when it comes to county commission, it is certainly not uncommon for there to be opposition, and certainly for the local commissioner often. And this comes up most often in East Knox County and South Knox County and Northwest Knox County these days, to side with the people who already live there, which is a very understandable thing. I mean, the people who live in Carter are the ones who elected Adam Thompson. The people who don't live there yet did not vote for him.
That's true.
And so it's a very natural thing for county commissioners to want to look after the existing residents of an area. But it's just a good example of all of these struggles around growth. And, when you put the opposition to growth in line with the opposition to certain kinds of growth, because Knox County is growing, and that's, as lots of people like to point out, that's something that county government has no control over. People moving to Knox, you can't pass a law saying people can't move to Knox County, and there's a lot of reasons probably that a lot of people wouldn't want to pass that law even if you could. So it's not so much whether or not the county grows, it's like how it grows and where and what the impacts of that are. And when you just kind of consistently push back against these denser developments, you are literally just continuing to do what we have been doing for the last 20 or 30 years, which has produced the situation both financially for the county and also structurally, as far as our ability to invest in infrastructure, that everybody says they also don't like. And so, it's a Gordian knot.
Well, and the only person, or one of the few people I know who could untangle that knot, is Hanson Sell.
That's right.
And he is our guest.
Yeah.
Coming up.
Hanson's you mentioned Maria McHale with East Tennessee Realtors. Hanson was actually her predecessor as Government Affairs Director at East Tennessee Realtors. He still works as a government affairs guy, although not for East Tennessee Realtors. But in his spare time, he has a Substack, and he's become a pretty outspoken voice on issues of growth and development in Knoxville and Knox County. One thing I always appreciate about the things Hanson writes is that they are very data-driven. Now, he is coming from what you would have to call basically a pro-growth point of view. He worked for East Tennessee Realtors, as you will hear in this conversation. I think Hanson is somebody who sees a lot of benefits in certain kinds of growth, and growth being directed in certain places. But he's got, I think, because he has spent several years immersed in all of this here in Knoxville and Knox County, I think he has a singular ability to think about this holistically, and also to look at the data and to understand what is happening versus what a lot of people think is happening, and what's not happening that a lot of people maybe think is happening. So given all of that, he's written some things recently, both on his own, and they've gotten picked up by Inside of Knoxville and the News Sentinel. So he's become sort of like a standard bearer, I guess you could say, for certain kinds of planned growth. And we thought that this would be a good time to have him on to kind of get a big picture look at all of this. Hey, Hanson.
How's it going, Jesse?
Pretty good. Thanks for joining us. It's been a little while since we've had you on the podcast, so good to hear your voice again.
Yeah, good to be here.
So we wanted to have you in because I think you've been doing an interesting, as far as I can tell, entirely pro bono public education effort here. You've been writing a lot online, both on your own. Is it a Substack you have?
Yeah, it's a Substack and totally, completely free.
And then some of that has also been picked up and published in the News Sentinel and Inside of Knoxville. And correct me if I'm wrong, but my sense is that, and I know you have a background in this, obviously, because you spent several years working with East Tennessee Realtors and really focusing on housing policy and data in Knoxville. And my sense is that you are trying to help people understand the complexities of all of these questions and controversies around growth and development and the kind of conflicting, I think, desires that people often have related to those. So to start out with, can you just talk a little bit about like what are you trying to do? What are you trying to help people understand and think about?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. So, growth has clearly become sort of the hot button issue in Knox County politics in a way that it hadn't been previously. And obviously that's in no small measure because of the pretty significant migration that we saw post-pandemic. But I think my goal really is to use data to help people better understand these things. I mean, in the age of social media today, there's a lot of misconceptions, misinformation about what is exactly happening and what's not happening. And I think from a growth perspective, I mean, we've just seen over a period of years this sort of growing anti-growth sentiment, like, we're full, Knoxville's unlivable. What I wrote in the News Sentinel was that you get on Facebook or you listen to people talk, and it's what you hear is what you think you would hear from a city that's, declining or stagnating or a place that people don't want to live. And clearly that's not Knoxville's circumstance. And so what I'm trying to do is, help people understand these things with a data lens forward and really understand the realities of where government can and can't work to address these things. I mean, we can't impose a relocation tax. We can't literally prevent people from moving here. We can't prevent them, outsiders from seeing that Tennessee doesn't tax their income. And at the same time, we don't want people to stop moving here altogether because there are some real downsides to a slowing population. Population growth tends to be good. It brings things that people want, national brands, new business, things of that nature. So I'm just trying to provide some context with these pieces just to help people better understand where we are, because I think the public conversation has sort of veered into a direction that isn't entirely realistic about, one, what the government can do to address these things, and two, what the consequences of the alternative is.
Yeah. And, one of the big issues that comes up a lot, obviously, is density. I mean, there can be a sort of knee-jerk reaction against any kind of growth sort of anywhere in Knoxville or Knox County, but that reaction is strongest when it looks like big growth, when it's, a 200 unit apartment complex versus a, 15 house subdivision or something like that. And I think that people struggle sometimes to grasp the actual impacts of density. Can you talk a little bit, give us a little bit density 101 of what doing certain kinds of more dense development in certain places can actually be beneficial, not just economically, but in terms of the kind of quality of life things that people think about in terms of traffic and environmental impact and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, density is an interesting conversation to the extent that in a lot of ways, more dense development in certain areas would actually achieve a lot of the things that we're hearing from residents, which is, we need to preserve our rural areas, what makes East Tennessee, East Tennessee. And in the planning lexicon, density is the way to do that. You find a small area where you increase density, and that allows you to preserve rural land in other places. It's not always viewed that way, and obviously, I think there's been some planning mishaps to the extent that we didn't update our comprehensive plan or zoning code for well over 20 years. But density is what brings. You really need significant foot traffic to make retail work, especially highly desirable retail. I think about even places like Farragut that have long asked for, some of these more nicer upscale retailers, and the response from them has always been, listen, there's not the sufficient population density. There's the income that's needed to support some of these things, but we need more people. And so density accomplishes a lot of different things. And then you look just from a tax revenue perspective as well. I mean, high density development tends to be less expensive on the infrastructure side in terms of how you're spreading those costs. And, when you're in a place like Knox County, in a state like Tennessee, where we have the revenue neutral law and new growth is really how we grow our budget, high density development is incredibly useful in that respect. But I understand Knox County has not always been a apartment heavy town historically. It's becoming more so. It's still a very, very small portion of the housing stock. I mean, we're overwhelmingly the majority of residents own their homes. So there's a bunch of different ways in which density helps, from preserving land, increasing our tax base in a more cost efficient way. It's also, in a high dense area, you can invest in infrastructure and road improvements in a smaller area, where people are already driving, which can help with traffic. So there's a lot of different things, but it is a complicated conversation because I think a lot of the public discourse is really detached from, they talk about the vibe recession. I think we're like the growth vibe, scenario where a lot of the conversation isn't totally connected to the fundamental realities of managing growth. And I think that's part of what I'm trying to do in a lot of these articles, is make those connections.
Can I interrupt with a question as producer Seth, everybody? Is there evidence of demand for density for people to move into? Because I think that's one of the ones a lot of people hear about and talk about. It's like, I don't want to live in an apartment. I don't want to move to this city to live in an apartment. I want to move to this city to live in a small house or a McMansion neighborhood or something like that. Because there was a recent one that came out, was the one on Gay Street and Summit Hill, was originally going to be apartments, and they've shifted to condos. And so it's more of the demand seems to be at least for purchase, not rent. But is there demand for condos over houses, or is it somewhat relative?
It's different. So, that example is probably a bit unique because downtown Knoxville has a plethora of multifamily units that all sort of came at once, which has helped drive the condo demand. You do need some diversity there. But when you look at vacancy rates, which I think is the most important metric in terms of demand, our vacancy rates are still pretty, occupancy rates are still very high. So there's generally pretty low vacancy. So, I think it's clear there's demand, and what exactly that's coming from is not, one thing. What we've seen, and I've seen in the data, and research that I've been doing, is that a lot of people moving to Knox County are actually renters. Even creeping towards a majority of newcomers are actually renters. And you also look, there's a pretty big shift on older 65 plus retiree population that is now looking for apartments at a higher rate than they were a decade ago. So I would argue there's certainly demand. And when you look at vacancy rates, when they're relatively low, I think that's a good sign that, yeah, there is demand. And I'll tell you too, apartment developers don't build, apartments that they don't think they can fill. We're certainly in a interesting time period right here because there has been an influx of new rental units on the multifamily side, but I don't think it's come at the expense of demand for home ownership. We're still overwhelmingly a owner-occupied county. But I think historically, when you look at how a city grows, and not just Knoxville, but really across the country, you start to see more demand for rentals, particularly when you see home prices grow as quick as they have in Knoxville.
Yeah, I mean, talk a little bit about that, because the single family houses are out of reach for a large segment of the population. The folks you used to work for, East Tennessee Realtors, talked about how someone with a median income can afford a $275,000 house, but that's not what's being built. The median price of a house is $369,000. So talk a little bit about how that plays into the apartment demand, because it's, if you're making $75,000, your household income $75,000, you can't afford a $400,000 house.
Yeah, listen, it's been a major paradigm shift, and really since the pandemic, although it was starting to happen, and I try to impress that this was not just a pandemic problem, it was something that was happening, albeit much slower, and the pandemic really took it off. But when you look at the data, I mean, just Scott, you cite the median home price, but it's even more stark when you look at the homes listed for sale. So I did that analysis just a few days ago and looked at like what percentage of the homes that are actually listed for sale in Knox County today are affordable to the median price household, and it's somewhere between 13 and 25%. And probably on the lower side of that, the range is because of differences in down payments, but very few homes are actually affordable to the median priced household, and it certainly drives demand for rental. I, in my own life, know a number of people who can't afford to purchase a home right now, and over the last few years, really since the pandemic, we saw home prices grow 3 times faster than earnings, which to me is not sustainable. Does that mean we're going to see home prices drop? Probably not. It's probably more of the gain will be made up on the earnings side, but some of that remains to be seen too. So yes, certainly it's the affordability factor is certainly pushing people towards rentals. But I think it's more than that. I mean, that is a huge part of it, but there's also some sort of demographic and lifestyle preferences and changes that I think is also driving the rental demand.
And as you have been writing about these things and talking about them publicly, what kind of response have you gotten? I'm just thinking of some of the social media comments I've seen on some of the things you've written. A lot of people are not super receptive to what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten pretty fierce feedback, most of it directed at me personally. I've been accused of being an outsider, and I will tell you, I am a born and raised Knox County, and so no outside perspective from here. But yeah, I mean, I think people are really mad, and to some extent, I understand that. I mean, everyday people are feeling the effects of this. If you didn't own your home, prior to 2015, I think it feels really bad right now. And they're feeling the immediate effects of higher prices, stretched budgets. I mean, there for a while in sort of 22 to 24, we were seeing rents, going up by $300 a month between leases. I mean, it's understandable, but I think some of that emotion sometimes gets in the way of recognizing and thinking about the issue globally. And, people say, well, we want to stop growth. But, when you go and look at other cities that have experienced population loss or very slow growth, the people there aren't happy. They don't enjoy that. And there are significant both economic consequences. There's consequences to quality of life in terms of the sort of things that are available. Do you still have places to go like Topgolf or, whatever you might enjoy? And so, I understand it, but I think we have to get back to having a more realistic conversation about what's possible. But certainly the response has been, very passionate from many. But that doesn't bother me. I'm putting things out there, most rooted in data, certainly with a perspective, but I understand where people are coming from. But I think it highlights sort of a long-term problem that we have in terms of we've got to have a more informed conversation about these things. But and as we talked about quite a bit, it's an incredibly complex issue, and right now, in the age of social media and really politics today, complexity isn't something that we like to grapple with or discuss with any real detail.
Yeah, we're familiar with that.
Absolutely. Well, what you mentioned, there's this disconnect with what people think and what the data shows. What's the biggest disconnect that you think that you see out there from what people's perceptions are and what the data shows?
Yeah, so that's a tough question, Scott. Thanks for stumping me a little bit. There's a lot of misconceptions. I mean, I don't think people are at all wrong about home prices. One topic that I've written about that's I think a huge misconception is the role of institutional investors in our housing market. It's very, very, very limited. Institutional investors, large, corporate companies own, way less than 1% of the county's total housing stock. And so even if we put all of those homes back on the market today, it would have a marginal impact on the housing market. So that's certainly a big misconception, is that a lot of this is being driven by, large companies coming in. But I also think the magnitude of migration is actually somewhat of a misconception. It was certainly elevated post-pandemic, but even the latest net migration data from 2025 shows that in 2025, our net migration numbers were actually lower than they were from 2015 to 2019. So, and some of that's the delayed effect of, people moving here in 2022. You're really starting to feel the effects now. But I mean, really, this whole conversation is replete with misconceptions about data, because how things feel is so different. I mean, you even look at enrollment, as you guys have covered in Knox County, has been sliding downward for the last few years. So there's a lot of different areas where the data really doesn't jive with the public conversation. And, I've encountered a scenario, and I think everyone, here has, is that, some people just don't want to hear data. And I get it. Like, your data doesn't change your day-to-day reality, but there are some real misconceptions, and I think institutional investors certainly highly among them. And also just even the extent of out-of-state home buyers in the for sale market. It's not like they're not overtaking our housing market. The majority of home buyers are still moving within county, so it's not what a lot of people think. Or at least what their perception of the problem is.
Right. It's not this like giant sudden invasion. It's more the end result of actual several decades of pretty consistent growth is what we've really had.
Yeah. And even a, 30% increase and, or 15, 20, 30% increase in home buyers who are from out of state has a real impact, and you're way more likely to encounter that. But it still doesn't constitute a majority.
And, I think, and you sort of touched on this earlier, but I think another thing that people maybe don't sufficiently appreciate is the benefits that we all get of living in a more populated county and city. Like the things that people talk about that they like, they can go downtown and there's a bunch of stuff to do. We've got the urban wilderness. Like I first moved to Knoxville 30 plus years ago, and there is just a whole lot more going on any given day of the week in almost every corner of the county than there was then. And people like a lot of that stuff, but they don't always connect that to the fact that, well, that's partly because we have so many more people. When you have more people, it creates more demand for essentially everything. And I saw a Facebook post this past week by Cowboy Junkies, the Canadian band who were in town playing at the Bijou. And they had a comment. I don't know when the last time they were in town was, but they made a note of saying, hey, always great to be here to play at the beautiful Bijou Theater. And wow, Knoxville is hopping. There's so much going on in this town. And these are people who were maybe last here 10 or 15 years ago. That's partly because we just have a lot more people.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many examples of that. We get better Broadway shows at the Tennessee Theater. We get the Savannah Bananas, who I think 10 years ago probably wouldn't have made a stop in Knoxville. And obviously the sort of biggest example is Southwest Airlines, something that, everyone for years and years have been, longing for, would not have happened had we not been growing and seeing strong population growth. So there's so many ancillary benefits to growth. And also, this is how we've kept taxes low for the better part of the last 26
30 years almost.
Yeah. One can have a whole different conversation about whether that has been a successful strategy to the extent that we invested in our infrastructure. But just as a practical matter, we couldn't have done that had we not continued to grow and seen new growth, which drives our budget. So there's so many benefits, but this is sort of the problem with the growth conversation is there's so many aspects to it. You can point to amenities, you can point to tax growth, you can point to housing costs. There's so many aspects that if you narrow into it, you can come away with a very defined opinion, but there's also, 3 or 4 more aspects that sort of muddle the message and make it a little bit harder to have sort of a singular perspective. I mean, growth's complicated. It brings a lot of good things, but it undeniably brings some bad things. I mean, you hear about people complaining about I-40 and traffic on the interstate all the time. And there's certainly aspects that aren't good, but when you look at the alternative, which is population loss, disinvestment, I don't think that's a place where most people want to live.
One thing that I see all the time, because I cover planning commission and it pops up in county commission, there's zoning meetings, and city, well, there's zoning meetings, more so the county than the city, and that is the infrastructure. I mean, when there is a proposed subdivision going in somewhere in the county, the people that live near there will invariably get up and talk about how bad traffic is and the roads can't handle the traffic. What is something that obviously the public sector, because these are public roads, what can local government do to alleviate that problem? Is this something you need to go in and improve the roads first before there's development? And that's what a lot of people say. Or, pretty much what we do now is wait until there's development and traffic's really heavy, and then go in and do something. So,
well, first and foremost, Scott, God bless you for covering Planning Commission. It's not an easy task to sit through some of those meetings.
Well, sometimes I regret that decision.
But yeah, I mean, listen, I think this is probably the hardest problem that we have in terms of infrastructure. So on one hand, I mean, I understand logically the perspective that, hey, we need to do these infrastructure improvements before development comes in. But, I think you have to think about that from a county financial perspective. And, we are very, very limited in our funding available for infrastructure. I mean, we pay far more in debt service each year than we do on roads and infrastructure. And so, coming in and prospectively improving infrastructure with the hope that development comes later is really a risky strategy from a financial perspective. If that growth doesn't come, which is very possible. I mean, we've seen a pretty big slowdown in home building, particularly on the single family side, just as the economy has been a bit more rocky. So, I mean, I think that's a hard sell. If you're trying to be financially responsible, I understand where that perspective comes, but in many ways, it's the tax revenue of new development that funds the infrastructure after the fact, and it's certainly not a optimal strategy. I would love to see, particularly in the county, some more use of tax incentives and redevelopment areas that can sort of make that happen, particularly tax increment financing and trying to improve infrastructure. At least in tandem with development. I mean, there's certainly a push that I hear frequently, and I'm sure you do as well, about sort of putting the onus on the developer to fund, and in some cases be the people who improve the infrastructure. But they're in a catch-22 because, as you already mentioned, I mean, the new homes are not cheap right now. They're very hard to build in a way that would be attainable to sort of the mid-level household. And that's really not because the conception is that, the developers are big, bad, greedy developers who just want to make money. And of course they want to make money. They're just like any other business owner. But I mean, really the cost of land in Knox County has skyrocketed over the past 15 years. And when land costs go up, that's sort of a fixed cost that you can't control. And building materials have gone up. I mean, inflation. So, I mean, it's nearly impossible to actually build a $250,000 house today. So there's all these sort of, and then when you ask developers to put in millions and millions of dollars on infrastructure improvements, I mean, that's going to be capitalized into the home cost. And, whether that's a good thing or bad thing, one can have their own perspective on, but it undeniably makes homes more expensive. And, at the same time, people are displeased with the developers for, what price points they're coming in at, particularly on the new home side. So it's a catch-22, but I think, in many ways, the sort of put in the infrastructure before development gets here is sounds like a great idea. And in a perfect world where the county had a significant amount of money to work with, to make that sort of reality possible, it would make sense. But in the current financial position, I just don't see how that is a realistic scenario in practice, which obviously I don't think that answer makes anyone very happy.
Well, no answers in this conversation makes everybody happy. Well, and one thing about the infrastructure thing, about getting developers to pay for it, there is a big, a loud push for that. But one thing that I've noticed is that, and in the county, they do often put, a condition on the development approval that they make improvements to road that leads to it. And, often that's something like a turn lane to get in and out of the development, something like that. And that's great for that one stretch of that road. But then between it and the next new development, if there is a next new development down the road, nothing gets done.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's the consequences of a low tax rate. I mean, I'm not a fan of property taxes, and really many respects. I mean, it's in my view, a regressive tax. Um, Lower value homes tend to be valued closer to their actual value, whereas higher value homes, because they are inherently, harder to value, tend to be undervalued, which shifts the tax burden onto lower income homeowners. So, but at some point, property tax is the primary mechanism by which we fund pretty much everything in county government. And, at some point there's the law of diminishing marginal return. A low tax rate, I think, is a good thing. You've seen that as, I don't think people are moving here because of our property tax rate, but it's a good thing. I think people don't want to see more money coming out of their pockets than they have to. But at some point, it gets so low that making it incrementally lower, as has happened over the last 30 years, is coming directly at the cost of the county's ability to invest in roads and infrastructure. And what one of my pieces that's been a while back now is, when you adjust for inflation and take out education funding, which tends to be more state driven, the county's spending 20% less per person today than they were 2 decades ago. So not only is it a larger population, which tends to increase costs, but we're also spending less per person. And to me, that's just not sustainable. And it's a problem that I don't think is going to get all that much better, at least in the near term, as the county is going to see their debt service obligations, increase to, Scott, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but almost 10% of the budget.
Yeah, it's going to be over $100 million, and that's budget's $1.1 billion. So
yeah, and as we were just talking about here earlier, we're already seeing, and county commission just literally raided the school budget in order to give, never mind building roads, just to give salary increases to their existing non-school system county employees. But maybe to wrap up, we can hit on a couple of the other things we've talked about here from the last week, because we had this development report come out from Knox County Planning that kind of showed some of these trends we're talking about, especially with the multifamily development. And then also we had county commission voting against density in the Carter community, and people in Carter saying, we don't want this big new development because of what they perceive as the negative impacts of that. The developers, of course, said that, well, but this is the kind of thing that can help create the base for the kinds of commercial development that people in Carter are saying that they want. So can you just kind of hit on those two things? Did anything jump out at you about that planning report? And I guess to what degree is that Carter vote, I guess, just an example of the ongoing conflicts that I think we're going to continue to see?
Yeah, I thought that the development report was quite interesting. Actually, the decline in single family permits is already sort of an early indication of development trends in the county. Obviously, when you look at the city versus the city is very multifamily heavy, and the county is pretty single family heavy, although that has become less true in recent years. But the vast majority of the growth in housing units has been in the city in terms of what was reflected in the planning report. Obviously, there has been some big examples in the county that tend to come with a lot more fanfare, if you will, than projects located in the city. But I think the Carter community, that vote was pretty indicative of where we're at as a county. And as I wrote in a News Sentinel article recently, I thought the county Republican primary election was pretty indicative and driven by, if not exclusively, the anti-growth sentiment in the community. Very much a large part of it. We basically saw the entire political establishment unseated in a single election, and pretty much all of the outsider candidates who are successful were running on anti-development platforms. And so I think we're going to see more scenarios like Carter. But what we're going to have to grapple with is when we start talking about these town centers, which I think was a central part of the conversation during Advanced Knox. People don't recognize the level of foot traffic and population density that's required to make mixed use work. I take One River Walk there on the old Baptist Hospital site as a good example. I mean, when that was being developed, there was a lot of intense pressure to make this multi-use and ground floor retail, and the answer was, listen, we just don't have the population density to make it work. And what I say to people all the time that I think is something that many don't know is that ground floor commercial commands significantly higher rents than ground floor residential if it works. Obviously, an empty commercial space is definitely not more lucrative than ground floor residential. And I use One River Walk as an example because now there's two more apartment complexes across the street, and all of a sudden there's a convenience store and a restaurant. And that's sort of how this process works. And so particularly on this multi-use, mixed use conversation, we can't demand that retail comes. It's going to follow demand from consumers. And in most cases, the first apartment complex is not going to be enough income and population base to support those things. And again, I mean, this is just a reality of the development process and how to make a project pencil. And, a lot of people don't want to hear that, but it's a reality. Nobody wants to run a business where they don't have the customer base to sustain it. And you got to put something there first. Something starts the snowball. Unfortunately, I think we're going to see a lot more rezonings denied in the future, and I think ultimately that we shouldn't put housing everywhere. Don't get me wrong. I do think that there needs to be standards, and we need to do things the right way. But there's going to be real consequences to continuing to say no to these things. As I continually impress on people, is that we can say no to housing, but we have to grapple with the reality that will not help housing costs, and it will exacerbate them. And the logical conclusion to that is, where are police officers, firefighters, teachers, healthcare workers going to live in our county? And what the data is already showing us is that we're hemorrhaging lower wage households to surrounding counties who are having to move farther out because they can't afford Knoxville. We're actually losing aggregate income in our tax base in some respects to that as well. So, the answer is tough, and we need to have a real conversation about it. That's been part of the problem is, people want, both sides of the coin, and in some circumstances, unfortunately, just not the reality of the development process.
All right. Well, Scott, you got anything else you want to?
No, I will say that you mentioned One River Walk. Across the street from One River Walk is the Corbella Temple side, and there's a proposal for apartments there. And it's not been a huge part of the conversation, but one part of the conversation was, what about ground level retail, which would not work on that side anyway, which is not in part of the development, but that's part of the South Waterfront plan, is to have ground floor retail, and that's one thing that development will not have if it goes forward. And to your point, nobody would be walking by there. It would not be conducive to ground level retail. There would be enough foot traffic.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, I think I saw that, and certainly not a place where retail would work well. And I will also just add, because this is my tangent, but sort of prospectively building something that could be converted to commercial later is just not practical. It doesn't happen. It can happen in older buildings that have been around for a very, very long time, but generally the reverse is true. It's easier to go from commercial to residential, but it sounds like a nice idea in theory, but it really doesn't happen anywhere. And I still see that come up quite a bit.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for joining us, Hanson. Interesting stuff. And thanks for bringing the data to the conversation, because that is often missing from it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me.
And take care. And thanks again to Hanson for joining us. And you can find a link to his Substack in our show notes. And Scott, what else do we have to talk about?
Well, we don't have anything else to talk about from last week. This coming week, we've got a couple of our local governments are meeting. County Commission meets on Monday. There is, of course, they've already passed the budget. They did that this week. There's not a whole lot on the agenda. One thing that I'm looking forward to is Phil Ballard, the property assessor, is going to talk about the reassessment, and of course there's going to be implications for the tax rate coming from that, and so he's going to be there to talk about that. City Council's meeting on Tuesday. County Commission meetings at 5 p.m. at the main assembly room of the City County building on Monday. Tuesday, 6 p.m. at the main assembly room of the City County building. Well, that'll be City Council. They don't have a whole lot of controversial stuff on their agenda either. There will be, they are appropriating money to multiple providers of services to people who are homeless, and that's going to be the bulk of the meeting will be that. But we'll be there to cover both of those. We'll cover other news. We've got other news that we'll be covering. That some of it some feature stories we're going to be running. So you can find all of that, as we said before, at CompassKnox.com.
And real quick on the County Commission agenda, did I see correctly that Commissioner Andy Fox is withdrawing the presentation that he was planning to make about the evils of Islam?
Yes, you did see that. So I have not talked to Fox about why he decided to withdraw it. I would imagine it's because he's gotten a lot of blowback from that, and he doesn't back down very often on things like that, but he has withdrawn it, not postponed it. So presumably it's not going to be brought back up anytime soon. So
right, I think he said he was going to talk about the ways that Islam and Muslims are not compatible with the United States of America.
Yeah, it was a pretty extreme take on that. I think even people agree with him, say it's pretty extreme, but they would say that that's not a problem. But he will not be making his presentation on that on Monday. So, but whatever does happen next week, we'll be there to cover it and in Compass, and we'll talk about it next week, of course, on Compass Points. Thanks again, Seth Barber, for your stellar work there at the control panel. Thanks to Will Wright for providing music for us. And that will be it this week for Compass Points. We'll be back next week. Thanks.
CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And many thanks to William Wright for composing our theme song. Compass Points is a partnership of Barking Shark Media and Barbarian Productions, and recorded by Lord Seth A. Barber at Barbarian Studios, Knoxville, Tennessee.